welcome to the session How to Use Empathy to Foster Empathy with Miro retrospectives. And today we are going to talk about the feature that we have built, the private mode, how we build this feature. And through this, we are going to give you a sneak peek into how we build features and products at Miro. A little bit of intro about us. My name is Yogesh. I'm a product manager. And with me are my two favorite people, Bo, who is the UX researcher, and Hui, who is a product designer. But before we begin, a little bit about what is private mode. Now, this is a feature, if you haven't used it already, this is a feature used in brainstormings, retrospectives, which allows participants to write on sticky notes privately, which means that once you are in the private mode, other people cannot see the content on your sticky notes that you are editing. And only when the private mode is turned off, the content is going to be revealed. What can also happen is there is a switch here which says make names anonymous. If that is turned on, all the names of contributors are also going to be anonymized forever, which means even after the private mode ends, nobody would know who wrote which sticky note. Now, this is particularly helpful to avoid group bias and group thinking so that people are not influenced by each other's ideas and opinions, but also with anonymity, you give your team members a safe space where they can honestly speak up about whatever they want to say without the fear of getting judged. Now, we will show you how this feature really works. And for that, I'll just exit the presentation mode for a bit. And to use this feature, what you have to do is go at the top and in the apps list, you will see private mode. This is like a little sticky icon with an eye icon. If you don't see them at the top, you can open the more apps drop down and you will definitely find it here if it is not at the top. Now let me click the private mode. And what you see here is the private mode app that comes here. It describes what it does, and you can choose whether you want to keep the names anonymous or not. In this case, I want to keep them anonymous, and I can click on turn on private mode for all. Now, once I do that, you will see that all the cursors are brought together. Everything is anonymized. And what we'll do is we'll do a little exercise. So we have 5 people on the board. Everybody will talk about what is their favorite topping on the pizza. Now, you will notice that when people have started writing the sticky notes, I cannot read those sticky notes. But when I write, I can see my own sticky note only. So this way, whatever ideas are coming along, I have no idea what people are writing. Now that everybody's done, I'll turn off the private mode and it turns off the private mode for everyone. They get 5 seconds to be ready. And all the cursors come back with the names, right? And all the content is, oh, interesting. So people like, I didn't know, people in my team like ananas or the pineapple on their pizzas. But yeah, because the session was anonymous, even if I turn on the name of the author, it is always going to say anonymous. There is no way that I can find out who is this person who likes pineapples on the pizza. So this is a little bit of the feature, how it works. Let me go back and start presenting again. The product development lifecycle at Miro, let me talk a little bit about that. This is a very high level overview, of course. From the product strategy, we come up with multiple priorities. And if, for example, one of the priorities aligns well with our team, we would then go into detail and try to find out what are the different problems in the space. Now, when we do that, we might come up with multiple opportunities or problems that we might want to solve. And we may prioritize, pick up 1 or 2 of them. Say we pick up problem number 2. And then the next step is to think about how are we going to solve that problem. Now, this is where the whole designing, mocking it up and prototyping, validating with users, it goes on and on. And it's an iterative process. It happens multiple times over. and we keep refining the problem and the solution all together at this point of time. Then we move on to the build stage, where again, it's not just that design is ready and we start building it. This is also an iterative process which happens over and over again. We build something, we test something, then we build again, we tweak something, and then we iterate. And I think what it really does is, in the beginning, we may not have much idea about the whole problem space itself. And then we have to find or sort some of that, come up with the problems that we want to solve, identify, prioritize those problems, and then really easily then move into the solution space and then design and build the product. Now, this seems perfect, but then change is constant, even at Miro. And this is what happened last year, that we were the team who used to focus on something else. And then there was a reorganization that changed priorities, throwing a completely different challenge at us. And this was something which we had never thought about. So we used to be a team that was focused on solving the problems for UX researchers and designers. And then the priorities of the team changed to retrospectives, a completely new user persona. We knew nothing about. All the intelligence that we had gathered over a period of time about researchers and designers was out of the window. So we were now in a state in which we had never been. We had to learn and perform and find out what we have to do. We had no clue. So I think this was a time when we really felt that we were in a dark space. And I think a lot of product development teams can relate to this. When something changes drastically and you don't know what to do next, where to go next. And that is where this customer-centric approach to product development can really be helpful. And this is the point where I would hand it off to Bo to talk about how she, as a UX researcher in our team, really helped us get out of this darkness.
Thank you, Yogesh. Like Yogesh just mentioned, we had to shift our priority to a retrospective and come up with a roadmap within just 1 month. But we knew very little about this topic. So before implementing any solutions, we need to build a solid knowledge foundation for this problem space with UX research. And that's the magic one that we use to get ready with this unknown. So starting with the discovery phase, we firstly wanted to identify the most critical user problem. And the question that we want to answer at this discovery phase, what did the problem space look like for retrospective? Who are our target audience? And what are their unmet needs? What solution currently exists for retrospective? And also what has happened historically in the company? And to answer these questions, we did an insight sprint, and then we shadowed how people do retro in real life scenarios and conduct in-depth interview with users. And now let me walk you through them one by one. So to begin with, we started with an insight sprint where we went through all the existing research, analysis, customer feedback, and also the market reports around retrospective. Within just 1 week, we summarized the learnings individually, and then we came together in a workshop at the end of that week. And then we had a discussion, shared our learnings, and identified the knowledge gap between what we have learned so far about retrospective and also the question remained to be answered. So this research activity really helped us, leverage on our existing knowledge and also really shorten our runtime moving into this new problem space. And also, as you can see here, we did that on the Miro board. Where else could that be? So at the end of the insight sprint, we were very excited that just within 1 week, we have already learned a lot about retrospective. And then we also came up with several ideas that we want to experiment in the next steps. At the same time, we also identified our knowledge gap and then narrowed down to a few research questions to explore in the next steps. So with these research questions in mind, we did interviews and focus group with the domain experts, so the agile coaches and engineer managers who are facilitating the retro for their teams. And they have a lot to say about their user needs and expectations for retro. We also shadowed how people do retro in real life scenarios to understand their user journey, behaviors, and pain points. So one challenge that we were facing at that time was to recruit people to join a research session because what they discuss in retro can be confidential, and also we have a very tight deadline. But it may take us extra time to find users to participate in our research. So we were thinking, why not just start with our colleagues, because we have a lot of them in product development teams and they do a lot of retrospective for sprints and for their project. And to attract them to sign up for the research, we were all wearing the retro costume and joined the Miro Connect events. So it's like a Friday happy hour session for us to hang out with a glass of beer and snacks, and also know what other team are working on. And if you want to sign up, and you can have a little stand, and our retro costume attract a lot of people to come to our stand and sign up for the research session. And also this changed the mind of a lot of people, how they perceive UX research, because initially they thought research is, on the one hand, definitely valuable, it's important, but at the same time, it could take a lot of time and could be boring. But now they find that research can be fast, lean, and agile, and it's fun and sexy. So after the research in the discovery phase, we identified 6 user expectations for retro tool, namely managing the recurring retro, get inspired with new retro format and template and best practices. And 3 is make it fun and engaging, then create an inclusive and safe space, and also cluster the similar ideas to vote on topics. And lastly, keep track of action items and incorporate them into daily work. And also from our competitor benchmark, we noticed that many features were already the industry standard in retro tools. Some were available or partially available in Europe, but some were still missing. And we need to prioritize the most critical problem for us to work on. So moving into the define phase, the question that we need to answer were what are the most impactful problem for us to focus on, and what is meaningful for us to measure, and also what are potential risks in the direction that we might pursue. And to answer these questions, we surveyed Miro users, and also we collaborated with our data analyst to define how to validate our hypothesis and measure the success if we implement that solution. And with the insights from the survey and analytics, we narrowed down the user needs. We narrowed down to the user needs, creating an inclusive and safe space. Because for users, a retrospective should provide an opportunity and also a safe space for everyone to comfortably voice their opinion. For example, users want to have the possibility of their input not being visible during a retro session, so they can avoid the group thinking and not be influenced by each other's input. Also, especially for the newly formed teams, they want to have the author name not being identified, so they can be honest with their comments. And the solution for that is the private anonymous mode. After we had this clarity about what is the most critical problem for us to work on, we moved to the design and build phase. This is a time for us to come up with a design solution for this private anonymous mode, and also keep iterating the design. So now let me give the mic to our amazing designer Hui and let him walk you through the design journey.
Thank you, Bo. So as Bo explained, during the research phase, we've identified a few key challenges from the user side. And the most fatal one for us to start is to avoid group thinking. So right away, we were thinking, why not just try to hide individual content during the group session, which led us to build private mode. Meanwhile, we have a secondary user challenge, which is to create a safe space. So straightforward, we were thinking, why not just to hide the names or identities, which help us to build a feature within the private mode, which is to make names anonymous. So after the research, of course, it's the time for ideation. So from these slides, you see all the different alternatives that we've been exploring during that phase. So being exploring different visuals for the sticky notes, how it looks in the status when it's in private mode, and how it looks like when it's reviewed,
we've been also exploring different entry points for private mode, whether it should be a setting options on the board, or maybe a mode turn on or off, or maybe integration with other apps such as timer. Or another option could be that it's a side panel where the users just put all their inputs, and when they're ready, they can drag and drop everything on the board. And eventually, the winning concept is actually how we implement it right now. So we decide to make it more as a collaborative app where the facilitator can take the control to turn it on or off. While at the same time, we decide to use the scribbly lines on the sticky notes to indicate those are the hidden content. And the reason why we chose this solution mainly is because we are validating it, whether it solved the key user problems that we identified in the research from the beginning. But at the same time, we think it's actually very important to rethink why the user come to Miro, which is because Miro is a place for collaboration. And in that sense, the scribbly line in the concept really give the feeling of presence of others, which we think would be the key in this concept. So after the ideation, we of course have several rounds of validations. What I found mostly interesting at Miro is that actually we do a lot of dog fooding. So after the team actually built the beta feature, then directly we launch it internally to our teams. As you know, most of our colleagues, we are end users of our product as well. So it's very nice that at the same time, we're sharing the internal teams how they use private mode in their retrospective. And from that, we learned a lot. So the first finding is very happily, scribbly lines is liked by everybody, which kind of validates our hypothesis from the very beginning that the feeling of presence is very important in our tool. But at the same time, we also received a few user feedbacks, have some questions around the ending part. Some of them think sometimes, especially for participants, they're not fully prepared when the facilitator ends the private mode. Either they're still writing some inputs in the sticky notes, or maybe because on the board itself, there's no visual announcements from the facilitator time. So that's how we actually, before the real release into the production, we added two little addition features to the private mode. The first one is a small countdown. So as you see in the GIF, when the facilitator click on end and review for all, there will be 5 seconds remaining to end the private mode to make sure everybody in the session is fully prepared and get ready to end. And another additional little features that we added is actually this auto text reaction for the facilitator to announce that the private mode is ending. So after that, of course, we release the feature, but as you all know, the design iteration never ends. So we actually been very proactively collecting the user feedback and looking into the analytics. And that's how actually we brought in two additional features after the first MVP release, which are end by facilitators only, which give facilitator full control of the session itself. And also, as we mentioned, make names anonymous. At this point, I will give the stage back to Yogesh to explain more details about how we iterate.
Yes, thank you, Hoi. And the next thing that we want to talk about is the iteration. So even though since beginning, we had the idea that we want to build a private mode, which would also be anonymous and would have all sorts of controls and things would happen. But the way we planned it was in terms of iterations. And the first iteration that we had was about avoiding groupthink, which means that in the first version, we did not have the option to keep names anonymous. But we did have things like the scribbly lines that Hoi was talking about, or the little eye icon to show that this sticky note is private. And we did not have the option for the facilitators to control who can end the session. So in the beginning, if you have been using private mode since beginning, you would have noticed that in the beginning, anybody in the session could just hit the turn off private mode and it would end for everyone, which worked in some cases like retrospectives, but in larger meetings, sometimes it was accidentally hit or somebody just hit the button and it was accidentally ended and all the content was revealed. There was, and we were getting this feedback from the users. So you see these comments are the real comments from users. So whenever you use private mode, a pop-up comes up and asks you about your experience. And if you enter the text, trust me, we read each and every comment every week from that. And we have read more than 16,000 comments so far. And while people were happy that the feature was finally there, they were asking for facilitator controls like, oh, I don't want anyone else to be able to end it, or I still need anonymous mode. This is not complete. And I think that's the beauty of building it in iterations, that you also learn along the way. So the next iteration was giving the facilitators the control that only they can end it. So we added this new option which said allow anyone to turn off, whether you want to give that control or not. And I think that made a lot of difference for tightly facilitated meetings where the facilitators wanted a tighter control. And I think that really helped. And but the need for the anonymity was not going away anywhere. People were liking the changes that we were making, but they were also asking for hiding the cursors and hiding the names of the people who are adding these comments. And then the iteration, which we recently released, was about giving the safe space to people so that they can be honest in their feedback. And we added this option here which says make names anonymous. So the cursors are anonymized, the author names are anonymized, the history and activity, everything is anonymized, and nobody would ever know who wrote which comment. And I think that's when we started to hear a lot of positive feedback as well, that people who had been waiting for this anonymity over there. In a way, our principle for building this product was similar to this very popular illustration of we were building the MVP at each stage, but trying to make sure that whatever we built really worked. It was usable by the user in whatever form it was, rather than aiming for the final anonymous private mode. We were building it in stages, which still worked and solved some of the problems. And yeah, a fun thing. Bo had a dream when we had the reorganization last year. Bo, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I had a dream, but it's different from Martin Luther King's I have a dream. I had a real dream at one night. And then, when we learned this changing party, and I dreamed about our designer Hui and told me, I think it's okay to work on retrospectives. It's fun. It doesn't matter to work on something else, some new topics. So on the other day, I told Hui my dream, and he was like, that's impossible. The reality is always the opposite of your dream. But after 1 month, when we're doing the prototype testing for private mode and asking the same question, and what was your answer, Hui?
I definitely love it.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the customer-centric product development, that even though 1 year ago we didn't know anything about this space and we were thrown off balance by this reprioritization, once you start to talk to the customers and once you start to learn about their pain points, how they do things, shadow their retrospectives, etc., I think you get to get a sense of it and you really learn about that space. And in a very short period of time, we were the experts on retrospectives at Miro, and which was very, very helpful. So I think once you have that customer-centric product development, I think it gives the whole team a strong purpose which you can rally behind. And that was so true in this case. And yeah, these are some of our engineering members, the pretty faces behind the private mode. And thank you everyone for your time today. I hope you enjoyed the talk. enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And also, we saw that you have a lot of questions in the chat. My colleague, they are trying to answer them. Yes, feel free to reach out to us if you have any question about private mode and also how we build it.
Thank you.